Hi, we are the Northwestern DFA team. My name's Elena. I'm a junior and I'm studying psychology, design, and marketing.
Hi, I'm Brianna. I'm a freshman and I am studying mechanical engineering.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a sophomore and I'm studying biomedical engineering.
Hi, I'm Karina. I'm a senior and I'm studying design and computer science.
So, the problem that we were tasked to design for is how can we engage and empower youth to be change makers in their communities? So, we were working with youth from the YMCA's Changemakers program in order to design for this problem. So this is a summer program put on by the Y for high school age students. It's centered on activism and it's a part of the youth and government branch of the Y. So it includes speakers, mentors, and workshops for students.
So we were able to talk to a group of these students who got to go through the motions of this program. And based on really what they had to say, we created these two personas. So our first persona is Hannah, and she noticed that health classes at her high school present issues that are rather triggering, like sexual assault, LGBTQ health, and sexual health in problematic ways. And she wants to attempt to reform the way these classes are taught, but she's not exactly sure how the best way to do this or even where to start. Brian is our second persona, and he was inspired by the recent Black Lives Matter movement, which the youth really took a huge part in making, especially in social media over this past year. And he wanted to figure out how he can implement change in his community. So where he lives in San Diego, Breonna's Law actually hasn't been passed. So he wanted to help push ideas like this and other issues involving Black Lives Matter by creating an app where youth community members can promote protests and other activism events in a more localized way. But he's really frustrated by not being taken seriously solely due to his age. So that was definitely a pain point we wanted to focus on. So we noticed that there is no lack of passion whatsoever from both parties. These students are amazing and they really want to create change in their communities. They're just not sure exactly how to do that. And we also know that the Y has all these resources and really, really wants to help these change makers. So our role as Northwestern, we think that we could really bridge this gap and make both parties happier in this sense. But a lot of the current programming available to these students focuses a lot on teaching and mentoring and things like that. So we want to be able to make a more action-based solution where students can implement what they've learned into real change in their communities. Some quotes that stood out to us by these students were, "I love the Changemakers program, but I wish it didn't feel so much like school in the online format. The Netflix tab on the other window of my computer starts looking really appealing when I start to get bored." I'm sure everyone can relate to this as we've all been on a remote setting these past few months, so this is another pain point we wanted to tackle. Another quote that really sums up what these students are feeling is, "I love continuing to learn about issues I care about in government systems, but I wish I was able to gain hard skills like coding and public speaking that let me push my knowledge to action."
So the general sentiment that we found amongst these change makers is they've seen other young people take action and make a change, and they would also like to do that, but they don't know where to start. So we sort of refined our how might we statement to make it more specific to how can we facilitate turning young people's passion for activism into actionable change by allowing them to lead and develop projects they have ownership of. So our idea is to host a Changemakers Designathon competition where changemakers will develop a design idea from start to finish. They'll also have the opportunity to focus on topics they truly care about and learn relevant skills. And this will all be done through action-based hands-on learning.
There are three main key features of the Designathon: student-to-student learning, a mentorship aspect, and timeline and sustainability. Prior to beginning to design the Designathon, we had an in-depth look at the past DFA projects with the YMCA. In the spring DFA projects, there were final products such as a web magazine and a podcast, which had an emphasis on peer educating. We wanted to maintain the spirit of those programmings through the feature of student-to-student learning. We are aiming to execute this through youth-led workshops and skill-building tutorials on skills that they are interested in sharing with their peers, making the program both interactive and allowing them to connect with their peers. For the mentorship aspect, we will connect the changemakers with college-age mentors with experience in the fields of interest or with skills the changemakers are interested in developing. Our third main feature is the Designathon timeline and the sustainability of the program. We have two big questions for this: whether the project should be short-term or long-term, so whether the program should be a small weekend project or over the course of multiple months, and how to hold the program, whether it be annually by the YMCA, put on one time by our group, or whether there should be a leadership program implemented by the changemakers for the changemakers. As we continue this program into the next term, we will present these aspects to the changemakers and the YMCA, and we will test the options for the most suitable final program. With this, we can now assess how the Designathon tackles pain points for the students. The Designathon offers a way to get their ideas off the ground. It provides action-based learning. It connects them with other passionate youth, and it gives them resources and adults who are interested in helping their cause. Looking back at our changemaker personas, Brian and Hannah, we can see that Brian now has the opportunity to develop his app that he has in mind. He has free range in terms of creativity for the project. He can gain software and design skills, and he can dive deeper into the Black Lives Matter movement and pertinent issues related to it. Hannah now has the opportunity to work with other students who share her concerns. She can learn skills like writing, curriculum forming, and public speaking, and she can get inspiration on how to approach the issue by learning what other peers have done already.
So in terms of our next steps, firstly, we are planning on continuing this project through next quarter. Just because of COVID, our timeline was pushed back a bit. So we're really planning on testing these features and continuing to work on the project in the next quarter. So the first step would be to test those 3 design features that we talked about and see what would be the best way to implement them. So firstly, the peer-to-peer teaching, we're thinking of having the change makers that we're in contact with actually record video tutorials or write online tutorials and share them with the other change makers, and we'll just see how that ends up going. We're also thinking for the mentorship program, we have access to a whole pool of college-age students, so we could really pair those college-aged mentors with the change makers that we're in contact with, and set up that initial mentorship program. And then in terms of seeing what timeline we want to implement and how we want the sustainability of the program to look, we really want to talk to the change makers further and see what they would prefer to take part in, and what sort of leadership and implementation system they would be most excited about. And we're also planning on talking to the Y about this, and going from there. Ultimately, after we refine these few features, we want to hold a design-a-thon or two and see what works well, what doesn't, and refine that model and hopefully iterate again and be able to hold a few more design-a-thons and ultimately come up with a final framework and action plan that we can deliver to the Changemakers program in order for them to hold these design-a-thons in the future. So thank you, and we are really excited to hear from you and hear all of your feedback.